Oh, hi, Benita Lee here. You are at Virtual Book Club, the book club where you don't have to read the book to come. Book club started in October 2020 during the global pandemic. Each week, we would hold a Zoom meeting to discuss and read themes and topics that we found in the great books of our time. Book club is not mandatory. So the guests that drop in, they drop in as their schedule allows. There was one time at the beginning of the year where more than 10 guests dropped by and I had to bounce someone. I couldn't let them in. So sorry to whoever that was, but it's first come, first served at the book club. In the past, when only one other person showed up, this is when it was in Zoom, I would have a conversation with that person. We talk about business, social media, streaming, and I got to know the person one-on-one. So virtual book club has been a treat for me every week since then. With me today, I am joined by Hal Guerin, Robert Barry, Marianne Khalil, Leslie Neidig, Avil Beckford, Bobby Lee. Oopsie. Sorry about that. When there's more than one person, I have trouble with the controls, obviously.
Hey, Benita, if you want to go to the FIFO method of accounting and we get more people, I was the first in, so I'd be happy to be the first out. Let the other people in.
Yeah, I wonder how I fix that so that you can be under the book.
Just tell everybody how. Go away. And that fixes it.
There. Hal's gone away. Okay, let's see. Okay.
Wait, and we lost Marianne. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, we're arranging the Brady Bunch, apparently. The only one I can't arrange is myself, so I'm sad about that. Anyway.
You shuffled the deck chairs. Now Avil on my screen is owning the book. I don't have it anymore. It's not in my corner.
That's true. It's covering her home library.
Wait, and I'm Alice.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the way I first learned about which was debits and credits. Now, this is not going to be politically correct necessarily, but when I had my first accounting 101 class, the instructor said, just remember Fat Alice. A on the, and then ALI is like the belly, and then E is back where the legs would be. And so A and E is where the debits are on the left side, and L, I, and C, liabilities, income, and equity.
You look at Vern.
Now, a capital, is on the right side, and that's where the credits go.
Well, Vern has a finance background, so he's like.
Did you learn something there, Vern?
He just walked in at the wrong time. Vern just arrived. We have Vern and Webb.
Vern will say, "How's talking?" Anytime I walk in on that, it's the wrong time.
Okay, we got New York, we got Toronto, we got Florida, a man in Florida. We got Houston, we got, is it Utah or Ohio?
Utah, I thought.
Utah?
Utah for me, yes.
Cousin, I don't even remember where you live. That's how long it's
North
been
Pole.
since I visited.
I live in the North Pole here lately.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's right. We got Kuwait and we got LA in the house.
And New York.
And New York. I didn't say New York. I thought I said New York first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed it.
Los Angeles.
I'm
an Angelino. I just live in Kuwait.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know you were coming. Anyways, Chip War. The book is in your right-hand corner. We are reading it. I am loving it. I think it's made for Hollywood. It's got a cast of characters. It's got intrigue. It's got espionage. It's got suspense. It's got things that we have barely remembered about, like the Sony Walkman. Remember when the Sony Walkman was the first portable device that we all had, like going down.
Mine was a big yellow thing, is what I
Yes!
remember.
Mine was
I
yellow
had one.
too.
Maybe they were all yellow. I don't
Maybe.
remember.
Maybe
Clip to
they
the
were
side
all
of the pocket
yellow.
on your pants.
Yeah, maybe they were all
Yes.
yellow at first. Does anyone in the audience remember like what color the first Sony Walkman was? Because I don't think they came in all colors at first.
Now the first one was like this blackish gray. It was just dull, like the easiest color to paint, right? The cheapest and easiest color.
Right. There are so many people dropping in today. Thank you so much for dropping in, folks. There was 63 people who said yes. Like, I get it.
Really?
Maybe not all of them are here right now. But yeah,
I love it.
yeah, book club is really the place to be on Thursdays at it's Noon Mountain. Brent says yellow maybe too. But so I read part 3 of this book. I was supposed to read part 3 and 4, but Hal had me running down rabbit trails.
So now it's Hal's fault.
It is Hal's fault. I'm gonna blame
So
this.
are you gonna then pull a rabbit out of the hat? And
Pull a rabbit. Well, I don't have one right now, but yeah. Are you making reference to that post?
I don't know what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Well, Hal had been sending me articles about, what's happening in current events
Chipland.
in Chipland, about semiconductor chips and the new U.S. Act called the CHIPS Act.
Yep.
Now, I don't know why it is chips in capital, like if it stands.
Because it stands for something.
Yeah.
But I don't know what that is. But I would.
They gotta get creative. I don't remember what it stands for. But it's also the Chips and Science Act. And
Right.
stands for
Right.
something.
So this is really important, this microchip. And I feel like, to understand the news and the current events, it's important for me, myself, that I'm kind of like caught up to what these chips are. The same way that the same way that, when people were, Hal has it, creating healthy incentives to produce semiconductors.
Semiconductors. Yep.
Right. Yeah, wow, creative.
Yeah, very creative.
Wonder how much it cost them to come up with that.
Yeah.
$52 billion, apparently. Yeah, it's chips. Chips are the new oil. And they mean that in many ways. Like, at first I didn't buy that. And I remembered what Hal said last week. And that, without oil or gas, we wouldn't be able to turn on the devices that chips are in. So, but in the book, as I read further along, they don't mean like it runs the world, but it is treated as sensitive a commodity as oil. Like, I don't know if you guys knew, but after World War One, the U.S. put a ban on oil exports out of the U.S., and that didn't go away until 2015. It was called the short supply something or other. I'm not as creative.
Did you say 2015?
Yeah, it wasn't until
Wow.
2015. And this is after World War II. It wasn't until 2015 until the U.S.
created.
Did you want to play that? It wasn't until 2015 that the U.S. had an abundance of oil and gas, the shale gas, and they decided, oh, okay, now we can export. And in my opinion, that's when they said, screw you, Canada. We got our own now. We're going to export our own. No more pipelines.
No,
That's
I mean, you're making a really important point, Benita, because, and I'll put it out there as a rhetorical question because we don't know the answer.
Okay.
But, you know, we talked last week that we could hypothesize that maybe the way the U.S. chooses to interact with China is walking a fine line because of China's desire to be more dominant in chip technology and the fact that currently Taiwan controls 37% of the global market in chips. So the rhetorical question would be, what if Russia were one of the more dominant players in chip technology in the world? Would our approach to the situation between Ukraine and Russia be different? We don't know the answer to that. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that when you're talking about U.S. policy in relation to Canada and the position of oil, it's these world commodities that define how you choose to play global politics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As we learn in like social studies class, it's all about resources, right? Do you remember learning that? Like, I don't know why that stuck with me, but I think as a kid with very little resources, I thought, this is what I want to learn about. Like, I find it ultimately endlessly fascinating how the world runs on resources and everybody's fighting for these resources, and some people don't have enough and others have a lot. And I think that's why I went into this field, because that's the question I had as a kid, like, why do some people have so much and some people have so little? Anyways, getting back to what Hal was saying, I think people have to understand, first of all, that, Taiwan was once owned by China, just like Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong was taken over by the British for 100 years and then given back to China. But Taiwan was once part of China. It's like basically kind of like China's Hawaii, because it's a little island on the southeast shores of the mainland. But there was a war, and the U.S. had a little bit to do with that. And whoever was in China that didn't want to be communist and didn't want to be under communist law went to Taiwan. And then the U.S. has supported Taiwan ever since. So I think we have to all understand that. I don't know if everybody did or if everybody in the audience did. You have to understand that to understand what Hal was saying. Oh, I like the way that Michael Woudenberg puts it. He's the host of Polymathic Being and the owner of Polymathic Disciplines. Taiwan is the remnants of the imperial China after Mao overthrew China. I like that. Yes. In a sentence, yes. It's technically the pre-World War II government in exile. It is. They are still in exile. They are still in exile, and the U.S. protects them from China. So for one of the largest, actually the largest chip maker to be in Taiwan is strategically, geographically strategic to the US that they protect Taiwan. And like, when you hear it in the news, everybody just kind of assumes that we all know that stuff. And I don't think you can read the news unless you know like those intimate details like that, right? It's all me talking. Please, somebody else talk. I love the first. I love the first Walkman shares that Rob just did. Should we? I'm gonna share it.
Yeah.
Just because I wanted to show the book club members how you share on the book club. So you hit the present button. You share screen. I'm going to share a Chrome tab with you. And, do I have to scroll, Rob? Oh, here it is. So Rick was right.
Look at the price.
Oh my goodness. So the first blue and silver.
Oh, that's Canadian dollars. Those are screwy.
Now I saw one on eBay for like 700 or 800 US, but
Right. How did that happen? Rob, did you bring it up on? Oh, it's just set to Canadian currency for me. I see.
oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
It's
like
about
you brought it up
40,000
in.
yen.
Oh, wow.
Uh-huh.
Crazy. But when I read, and going back to Hal's question the other day, when he was like, what about Sony? Like Sony really was the first.
Is that your official Hal impression?
What happened there?
I think
Which
you glitched
impression?
in the Matrix.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. There was a chip war, and I think you glitched in the Matrix for a minute.
Oh, I see. Vern asked a question last
Where's
week.
Neo when you need him?
Where is he? Where's the Oracle? I need the Oracle. I need to consult the Oracle. All right. Vern asked last week, what about Sony and how does Sony come into it? Well, when I was reading the story of Sony and how microchips, semiconductor microchips, first went to Japan because of the low labor costs and the low capital costs and the tax incentives. When the US invented the chip. US citizens invented the chip. The chip was expensive to make in America because our labor costs are more. It's just the normal story of what's always happened, right? It went over to Japan and Taiwan, and they perfected the making of it. And Sony was the first to innovate a portable device that you could use to bring your music with you anywhere you wished. When I was reading that part, it reminded me of the story of Steve Jobs. But we can't make that story. We can't. In the West, we don't talk about Sony before we talk about Apple. But to me, it's really the story of innovation that came before Apple.
Yeah. No, when I was growing up, Sony was the thing to have. Like that was the name brand electronics to have, whether it was the Walkman or even record players, whatever it was, you wanted a Sony.
Mm-hmm.
Even the video gaming systems when the PlayStation first came out.
TV.
Yeah, TVs. Yeah,
If you
Sony
had a
was it.
Sony TV, you were like pimping.
You were rich.
But it hasn't held up very well.
No.
The Sony TV
No.
anymore, which was shocking.
Right.
But then again, almost all electronics, don't hold up as they used to.
But I
What
think
used
part of the
to
problem,
last for 10, 20, 15 years, now it has a cycle or life cycle of 2 to 5 years. It's just shocking.
part of
Yeah.
the problem with Sony, from what I understand, and correct me when I'm wrong here with real facts, but I think they were innovative, they were successful, they were highly reliable, high quality, very skilled at production, built a name brand, and then the technology kept moving on them. They weren't investing in R&D to the level they probably needed to, and they started losing market share because of the sophistication that needed to happen with chip development. And that's because it went from the US to Canada to Korea and then to Taiwan in terms of the kind of the pecking order of development. And now arguably the attempt, and I'll underscore attempt, is to try and pull some of that back to the US.
Indeed.
I read that the US was investing somewhere in the area of, and you correct me if I'm wrong, about $2 billion.
Yes.
Yeah, the Chips and Science Act that we've referred to, that was passed by the US Congress in rare, I have to say that these days, rare bipartisan fashion, is a $52 billion bill. Some of like 39 or 40 billion of it is direct investment in the facilities to help spur faster innovation and create jobs in support of the semiconductor industry in the US. And so the number that's been bandied about, because that's the total funding the bill could fund, and there's some really interesting issues and things that are coming to light now as to how the funding is actually going to work, but it's $52 billion price tag.
Right. So
And this is
instead of the space race, it's the chip race at the moment.
and this $52 billion price tag is a 5-year plan.
But everybody, I mean, yes, but the fact is that it's an application process. And so the big players are all figuring out how to right now get their applications in so that the Commerce Secretary, who is responsible for oversight of the enactment and funding of the bill in the U.S., Gina Raimondo, she's busy, being visible these days because the spotlight's on her, because that's where the decisions become as to what's going to get funded. And I don't want to go down, a different rabbit hole, but I shared a couple articles. There are some interesting things coming to light that are buried in the 392-page act that are just coming to light.
Oh
now.
my goodness.
That is demonstrating how politics, social policy, and what the true aim of the act is are all intersecting in an interesting
Right. We're
way.
not going to go into that part, but we will mention that Hal shared an article about that facility in northern Phoenix in Arizona that Michael is mentioning too. And I can't remember the price tag on that, but it was something like they wanted to build a chip manufacturing plant, or I'm going to call it a fab shop, fabricating shop, and the person they interviewed from the Taiwan, where they want to transfer the technology back to the US, was saying it's the technology isn't the hard part. It's the managing Americans that is.
Yep.
I wonder if you guys caught that part. And I was like, wow, like 100 years later, and it's still the same. Like what I learned in international business class is still the same issue 20 years ago, is
Yeah.
that it's not the business or it's not the business or the technology that is the hard part. It is the fact that the cultures are too dissimilar for them to have the right productivity and success as they did in the home country.
What I heard, I was talking with some friends and colleagues last night, that Taiwan is like the place, because you can't duplicate what Taiwan is doing, because the facilities have to be so clean is an understatement in terms of what it's going to take. They say one speck of dust would throw everything off.
Yep.
And so you can't reproduce those kinds of facilities just when you want to, even though you may have the money, which the U.S. does have. But they just to build something, they can start on one, and it's going to take them a while before they get up to where Taiwan is. But Taiwan and China going back and forth like this is creating a problem. And Taiwan just says, look, we'll take care of you with chips, but you got to protect us.
That's right. That's a better explanation of what I had in my mind. Thank you.
So
In addition,
now the U.S. has got to make a decision about, which I'm sure they have. We got to protect Taiwan if we want to protect the chips and have ready access to the chips. Otherwise, we are going to be in a very uncomfortable position when it comes down to chips.
Well, what's interesting is that the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which is the largest chip maker in the world,
right.
Has a fabricating plant in the U.S. They are currently applying for funding from the CHIPS Act, and I just posted in the private chat. This is from a news story about 2 months ago. The world's largest chip maker, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, revealed last month, which would have been December 2022, that it will be increasing its investment in the U.S. to $40 billion to build a second factory in Phoenix, Arizona, in addition to the initial factory announced in 2020.
wow.
So the brains and the access to funding is still believed to be in the U.S. And so even the largest chip maker in the world, which happens to be a Taiwan company, is growing its footprint in the U.S. And to your point, Vern, it takes billions of dollars to build one fabricating plant.
Right. And how many years, right? Like this isn't an overnight setup. We don't go into commissioning tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But that's quite insightful that the U.S., I believe this act came out in 2020, and then Taiwan decides to invest almost on par in the U.S. What a strategic move.
Yeah, the act itself has been talked about for years, and it just kept stalling. I don't know when it first surfaced, but it was passed, I want to say, in June of 2022 and signed into law in August by Biden. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. Some of the articles you read right now, they're being, Biden administration plans to, Well, yes, that's sort of true, but it was a bipartisan act, and everything in the act that was approved was approved. Now granted, every Republican didn't line up and vote yes on it, but enough Republicans did vote so that it was truly a bipartisan act. So, but it's incredibly complicated.
Well, I would like to see the transfer. I wonder if we would call it a retransfer. If the technology was transferred from the US to Japan back to the US, is it a retransfer?
That's a good question.
Yeah, like I wonder what we're going to start calling that, because has that ever happened in history, in like our known history? I mean, it doesn't feel like it. Like
The crit-
steel, auto, that didn't happen. It didn't come back.
the criticism that I'm reading about on the CHIPS Act is that with this transfer or focus on US, the belief is then that the chips supply will be more impacted, and with the manufacturing happening here, the belief is then the supply will be focused in the US, which will shorten it or devastate it even more outside of the US. The other thing that was commented is not having, in addition to what Vern was saying, is making sure you have the facilities and keeping it sterile, but also not having skilled workers here is a challenge.
Right.
Point. Yeah. In fact, they're investing quite a bit of money now into developing those skilled workers because, the foresight is we're going to need them. We better start training them now. And so they're starting to create those educational opportunities for skilled workers to be trained. But, that's not going to be overnight.
So, what do you think this means for leadership skills? Does it change anything in your mind that you think leaders should have in 2023 and beyond?
I'm actually wondering how much of AI can be involved in the manufacturing of these chips. Automation.
I mean, the process is pretty much automated as it stands. The human element shouldn't be a huge footprint, but the human element is the one that could screw it up the most. And we have, I mean, look, let's just face it. We have people over here that are somewhat entitled and sometimes kind of lazy. And that's going to be the biggest part that ruins it. Even when you look at car manufacturers, it doesn't take many people to run a car assembly line. And there are a lot of great people that work on car assembly lines, but all it takes is the one knucklehead to screw it up. And so the risks are a lot greater with chips because the one knucklehead could screw up more than just one car. He or she could screw up millions of dollars of chip inventory. So that's really what it is.
I
So
think
the
knucklehead is.
dude eating salsa, salsa
That's
with
a
his
technical
chips on
term.
the production line, just kind of drops it in there and messes it up.
I think knucklehead is the word of the day. I'm going to use that. Rick Condello, thanks for coming, Rick. I actually know him from probably close to 20 years. Did they not say the next generation of chips will be made in the US? I mean, they intimate that in the book. In the book, that's the goal, I think.
Advanced chips.
Yeah, advanced chips and the next gen, and the US being 5 years ahead of everyone else, that's always been the goal. That's not what's been happening, but I think that's the goal, Rick.
Well, the biggest part too is we got to watch the money and where it's spent and how it's allocated. Because think about this. Elon Musk has been able to build several Tesla plants. He has some in California, he has some in Texas. He's been able to create SpaceX and been able to launch rockets into outer space. So there's no reason why we can't actually build chip manufacturing plants here. It's all of the nonsense that comes with it that we have to really watch out for.
Right. The management
Nonsense such as
leaders.
what, Rob?
Well, nonsense as far as when you think about contracting, just the construction piece alone, there's a lot of theft, waste, and abuse in the construction management process. So government contracting alone as well too. We know that a lot of companies, when they try and bid on government contracts, many of them will overinflate the pricing. Then once you get it actually built, you got to think about the staffing. As I said earlier, it's the knuckleheads that are going to mess up the processes. Most of those plants are probably semi-automated to a large extent. I mean, it's a chip. The microchip is so small, it has to be a robot building the robots. But it's the warehousing, the distribution, the other things. I mean, look, say we weren't going to get deep into the CHIPS Act, but when you look at some of the things that are in there, they're already talking about putting things in there that have nothing to do with the actual manufacturing of the chips. So the money is going to be the issue. Follow the money, and then since it's a government-backed and sponsored plan, follow the other hidden or not so hidden agendas that will be put in there as well.
Yeah, there's jobs for everyone here. Auditors, trade compliance, conflict strategists, copywriters,
Child care centers,
executive coaches.
child care centers.
Yes. But we're not talking about that.
So I just looked up the skills required for skilled workers involved. And what I'm reading is it's a little bit more complex. Yes, it is heavily automated, but the design, fabrication, and testing will be dependent on skilled workers and very technical understanding of electronics, digital circuits, behavior of transistors. So this is very technical work. Physics, semiconductor physics, fabrication techniques, quality control, data analysis and problem solving, operation of the automated tools being utilized, programming languages. So
but the question is, how many? How
skilled
many for
workers
those
are going to be necessary. The feedback that I've read is this is a shortfall of the act, is not considering skilled labor. So it seems like this is a criticism. I can look
this
that
is
up.
the infrastructure piece. This is the building and the child care centers. This is the infrastructure piece.
Yeah. So apparently the act was more focused on financial incentives and not the infrastructure, as you're saying, Rob. Absolutely.
Well, the financial incentives are for companies to build the infrastructure, for like the construction companies and things like that.
Chris, you were supposed to be here. That's what you said yesterday, but we don't understand. I don't understand the question. With the data and content that can be stored on chips with microtechnology, what type of risk is involved around the smuggling and transfer? Yeah, that's what I deal with. And then Rick Condello says, with the U.S. government saying they may take back the export license from Intel, so that would mean Intel and others. Okay, so right now, I don't know, Rick. I guess that's like actually a headline in the news is that the U.S. government is saying they're going to take back the export license from Intel. And so is that Intel in the States?
I didn't catch that.
The prototypes come from this side of the world, right? Well, Intel, is he talking about Intel Japan? you're going to have to let us know, Rick. Because if it's an export from Japan, then it's coming to the US. But if the US is taking back the export license, he's talking about the US. So the Intel is in the US. Yeah, this has a lot of moving pieces. I see what you mean now, Hal, by if we bring articles into it, we can go down rabbit holes really quickly. Did
Well,
Robert?
part of the problem is, you know,
Yes.
if we're going to chronologically, easy for me to say, chronologically talk through the book, we would be at a place in the book that would be, you know, still, you know, a good number of years prior to today. But
That's true.
because the topic is the subject, let me say it this way, the subject is so topical right now, it's hard not to talk about current events. And so you got to pick, you know, are we going to talk about what's in the book, or are we going to talk about current events with the content of the book as just a backdrop? And that's your call, Benita, because you can go either way on this one. That isn't necessarily true for a lot of books and a lot of topics, but this one, you know, just
Okay.
happens to be extremely topical right now.
Yeah, it is. And
Yeah,
there's
it
got
is.
so many pieces. Like when I'm reading it, I'm highlighting like almost every page, Hal, at least one sentence, because it
Wow.
reminds me, not because I need to remember it, but it reminds
Fascinating.
me of another topic. Or yeah, I put an exclamation mark, Marianne, if it's fascinating.
You have a system.
Yeah, but I do like parentheses or yeah, when I think that we should talk about it at virtual book club, and I usually don't get to any of them, but I guess I
So
really
just to close out, I'm sorry. Just to close out the question on how many skilled workers, it says that it varies, but actually requires a significant number of highly skilled workers, including technicians, engineers, scientists, and other professionals. So it's
Right.
highly dependent on skilled workers.
And Hal's brought up a stat here. There are 112,391 people employed in the semiconductor and circuit manufacturing industry in the U.S. as of 2023.
That was just a Google search. So, but I think the point there is that for certain communities, and I think, you know, somebody pointed out specifically Phoenix, and the stat I pulled, you know, where the Taiwan company is investing heavily next is in the Phoenix area. It's not a huge employment sector for the U.S. as a whole, but for certain communities, it will be a significant employer.
Indeed.
And then there's the ripple effects of employment, because, you know, as Rob, I think, was trying to allude to, you know, the fabrication plant doesn't pop up overnight. It's got to be built, and the people who are building it have to get fed, and they have to have places to live because they might be coming in from other parts of the country to build the construction. And so the ripple effects of employment are well beyond when you're investing the actual new employment in the industry.
Yeah, we actually need a project manager or like somebody like a Peter or a Chris on this conversation, so we can talk about the upstream, the downstream, the project commissioning, the construction, all of that stuff. Like,
I'm just thinking of the impact of education industry as well. Sorry, Benito.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, huge.
You're right, Marianne. The education, because do those courses exist even now, or to what extent do they exist, and are they designed to move forward into the future for the advanced chip manufacturing?
Perhaps we can all get together and start the school and even apply for some funding from the CHIPS Act.
No, thank you.
We got the money.
No, thanks, Leslie. I'll
I
pass.
like it, Leslie. I like it.
It seems like a good business opportunity.
Yeah, there's a leadership component here. Like the guy that they interviewed from TMSC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, said himself that management was going to be an issue. And where there's management issues, there's conflict. And so that as this book club like always says, like leadership is this huge component of it that we never think about, and it all starts with us, right? So Marianne, you can audit us
I'll be happy to.
if we're allocating the funds properly.
That's right.
Well,
Yeah, but I love the ideas that the book club brings up. Is there anything from the audience besides apologies to Benita? And Hal, because I'm a chapter behind, I almost feel like extending this book one extra week.
You are in the driver's seat. We are passengers on the bus.
All right, although I welcome feedback.
Benita, you already extended it 1 week. Remember, you started in February, so you want to do it for 6 weeks instead?
That's right. Okay, but the real reason is because I'm covering up. The real reason is that we want to start the next book in line with a movie.
Oh yeah, that's strategic.
Remember, we had talked and we had discussed starting Shoe Dog, which is the biography of Phil Knight.
You're
Isn't
in the
that
driver's seat.
sorry?
You're in the driver's seat.
Zoom, zoom. Cousins think alike.
That's right.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I understand the point you're making, Benita, but I think we need to keep in mind that the movie and the book are going to be, other than that Nike is the theme of both of them, they're completely different.
Right.
The book is really about, Phil Knight's travails as an entrepreneur and all of the fits and starts and near-death experiences that the company he was trying to create experienced. And the movie is really about Nike's efforts to get Michael Jordan so that the Nike Air could get and what it did for Nike as a company by getting Jordan to get a shoe named after him.
I want to read both.
So I know I'm not saying do both by all means. I'm just saying, they're related, but they're not.
Right. We can't think that we're reading the book about the movie.
The movie's not going to be the cliff notes to the book.
Right. That's right. I'm okay with that. I think it'll be fun, and it'll cause excitement around book club as well as the movie.
Yeah, the movie's supposed to release April 5th.
Right. I had remembered that. And then the book club can concentrate on, the trials and tribulations of entrepreneurs, because I mean, a lot of us here are entrepreneurs, and it's getting to be that, Rick Condello excluded. Everybody that comes to the book club is usually taking lunch because they're at a full-time job, or they are entrepreneurs or solopreneurs themselves. So I think there'd be a lot to talk about when we read that one. So we won't extend chip war. And next week is the 4th and last week? Yes.
I think
Next-
actually next week is the 3rd because you had there were 8 chapters, and you did 1 and 2 last week, 2 and 3 this 3 and 4 this week. Sorry, I'm having a math problem there. So, but we can do 5 through 8 next week because we're not really sticking to the book itself anyway. We're really just kind of talking about the subject.
No, I think we can stick to the book and talk about the subject. I mean, the part that we're at right now in the book is that, it's all gone over to Japan. The technology that was innovated and invented in the US has all gone over to Japan because of labor, materials, inputs, the cost of credit, and then inflation. It basically mimics what's happening right now.
Why it shifted to Japan in this part of the book? Why it shifted was because DRAM technology. I'm not going to try to explain that in the interest of time. But that technology, Intel was failing miserably at that point in time. It was in the early 80s. And Japan was able to seize on the opportunity of being able so good at quality manufacturing and production to get that part figured out. And that's why Japan started to rise in that particular window. Intel basically took its eye off the ball.
Right. Yeah. There's lots there.
I think there are probably 2 major components that this chip war is wrapped up around. The first one is money, and the second one is politics.
Or power.
Well,
Yes.
with politics
Yes.
and money
Comes power. Which came first?
I'm just saying.
It's a virtuous or a vicious circle, depending on how you want to think about it.
And it's more than just the U.S.
Right.
Anything that has anything to do with microprocessors wants in on what's going on. They want to have some influence. They want things to go their way. And so you've got a lot of probably what I would describe as smaller players, but they are players nevertheless. And
Absolutely.
so the U.S. is trying to make sure that it keeps its edge over all the other players. And the only thing that we probably have going for us, well, there are a couple maybe, but one is money. I mean, we've got the money. And the other, and I don't know if this is entirely accurate, you'll have to check me on this, is going to be education. And can we crank out the kind of staffing and get the employee needs in place in order to be able to move in the direction that we want to move in, which is to dominate the entire chip market.
So it's obvious that Taiwan is trying to hold on.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
That
and
was
you know what?
strategic.
Something that came to me is that it's not that they required skilled labor, it's that they required obedient labor. And we don't really have that in America, in North America. We're not trained to be obedient assembly line workers.
No.
Okay. Once upon a time.
I think you're making a good point, Benita. I mean, I hate to start going down the stereotype trail.
Well, you know what?
But culturally, Asian cultures and why Japan, Taiwan, China, can all make major moves when it comes to getting things done once they figured out the technology is because they can work their workers to death in boring and mundane jobs, and they even talk about it some in the book, not a whole lot, of people basically working 6 and 7 days a week and doing nothing but, work and sleep. And the companies building sleeping quarters for the workers because there wasn't enough time for them to go home and be with their families.
Right. Is that what the daycare comments was about?
No. Short thing, since Rob brought it up. The CHIPS, buried in the CHIPS Act, are a number of things that would be arguably looking to extend social policy. And one of the things in there is that if you're going to receive funding under the CHIPS Act, you have to provide, and I'm not going to go into the specifics for time, you have to provide childcare for the workers that you have.
Right.
You have to make childcare resources available. There are other elements of social policy that are built into the act.
Interesting. I'm not going to ask why you were reading the act because I don't read free trade.
I didn't read the act. It's 392 pages. But when I started reading an article that was talking about the Biden administration is trying to make childcare part of the act, and I go, wait a minute, wasn't the act approved on a bipartisan basis? So why is it the Biden administration, even though, yes, it was Democrat-led and it was signed into law by Biden himself, of course. So I went and just did a word search on the act to say, you can't make this stuff up. It had to be in the act that was approved. You can't just go and say, hey, we're going to start attaching these things to the rules. The Commerce Department has to write the rules embedded in the intent of the act. But in the intent of the act are these social policies. Curtailing stock buyback programs.
I was just telling Chris Postel yesterday that I love that auditors come to the book club because we're not going to miss anything. They're not going to miss anything.
And every once in a while, I'm telling the truth and not making stuff up. It's amazing.
I'm pretty sure you got things backed up. Whatever you say, you got some backup.
The interesting thing is I'm happy to hear that they're considering the social aspects. What they didn't address is the environmental impact, which I'm actually quite surprised.
Right,
or at least it's not talked about and it's buried in the bill, and I just the press hasn't picked up on it. But I don't know.
I had an infographic that kind of went down that rabbit hole, Marianne. So maybe I'll share it next week. Now that we all know how to share it. That's the music to signal the end of Virtual Book Club today. We hope you'll come next week. We're going to be reading parts 5 and 6. So if you want to get caught up, then we're reading parts 5 and 6, which are China's Challenge, or let me think. No, sorry. Offshoring Innovation. I don't have my Roman numerals right. Offshoring Innovation and China's Challenge.
Okay.
And when you get to part 4, it's going to be fun if you haven't gotten there already, because it actually talks about chips the way that we talk about chips, which is so far salt and vinegar is winning the race. Your favorite chip, people. Have a very good weekend. Thank you for coming, and have a wonderful Thursday night.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.